Did you know that Nico Rosberg revealed Lando Norris's Achilles heel in the midst of the title fight? The most surprising thing is that, while Norris displays mental weakness in critical moments, Oscar Piastri is taking advantage of an advantage that could decide the championship. Let me know in the comments, do you think McLaren should rely on just one driver in this internal fight? The big question is, can Norris overcome this weakness, or does Piastri already have the 2025 title? In this video, we'll analyze the toughest internal duel in Formula One in 2025, Lando Norris versus Oscar Piastri at McLaren. A confrontation where not only speed matters, but also mental strength. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more analysis like this. McLaren has made a huge leap forward in the 2025 season. The British team, which in recent years had been struggling to establish itself among the best, now finds itself in a privileged position. It has a car capable of regularly winning races and directly challenging Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. This progress has not only restored hope to its fans, but has also created a new dynamic within the team, where the internal competition between its two drivers has become one of the main focuses of Formula One. Their goal is the World Championship. But to achieve it, both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri have had to live with an uncomfortable reality. Not only must they defeat Verstappen, they must also beat their own teammate, someone who shares exactly the same tools and opportunities. This transforms each race into a double test, where the enemy is both inside and outside the pit box. For fans, this duel is pure gold. Seeing two highly talented drivers on equal footing sparks inevitable comparisons. The press, analysts, and even former drivers like Nico Rosberg have scrutinized every detail, from race strategies to emotional reactions in moments of pressure. And the truth is that every Grand Prix weekend becomes a test of character, a battle not only of pure speed, but also of mental strength. McLaren, in this sense, faces an additional challenge. Unlike teams that tend to clearly prioritize a driver when they see a potential champion, the team has maintained a policy of equality. This means that both Norris and Piastri receive, in theory, the same treatment, the same upgrades, and the same opportunities to shine. However, this equality is also a double-edged sword. If not managed well, it can lead to internal friction, lost points, and wasted opportunities against external rivals who are unforgiving of mistakes. This context explains why the 2025 season is not only being decided on the track, but also in the psychological aspect. Norris, with more experience and years in Formula One, carries the pressure of being McLaren's flagship driver. Piastri, meanwhile, surprises with his maturity and serenity despite having less experience in the category. And while the two are fighting for the same goal, every mistake, every maneuver, and every strategic decision takes on enormous weight in the narrative of the championship. In recent weeks, rumors surrounding McLaren have gained momentum. It all started with statements from Nico Rosberg that sparked a debate. The 2016 world champion forcefully stated that Lando Norris has a weakness that could cost him the title, his mental weakness in decisive moments. Rosberg explained that, under pressure, Norris often makes mistakes that are not seen in drivers like Verstappen or even his own teammate, Oscar Piastri. This statement wasn't just a simple comment, but was backed up by concrete examples, such as what happened at the Canadian Grand Prix, where a lapse in concentration ended with Norris crashing in the middle of a battle. These kinds of observations have fueled speculation about whether McLaren, unofficially, might be considering giving Piastri more support. Not because he's necessarily faster, but because his consistency and psychological strength seem more reliable when it comes to competing in such a tight championship. In various specialized forums, and on fan social media, the idea is circulating that the team would be tempted to rely on the Australian driver as its stalwart, especially if Norris continues to make mistakes at key moments. Adding to this narrative are the strategic moves that have raised suspicions. In Saudi Arabia, for example, McLaren decided to test a package of aerodynamic improvements solely on Piastri's car during practice sessions. Although the team later justified this decision as a technical test without favoritism, many interpreted this decision as a sign that, internally, Piastri could be receiving priority in certain circumstances. These types of decisions, however seemingly small, fuel the theory that McLaren is paving the way to support the driver who shows more stability under pressure. At the same time, the driver's own comments have also been scrutinized. Piastri has conveyed a surprising calm whenever asked about the rumors, stating that for him, the important thing is to focus on the track and let the results speak for themselves. Norris, on the other hand, has had to respond more defensively, insisting that his self-criticism doesn't affect his performance and that he's working to maintain his confidence. These differences in attitude have only reinforced the public perception that one is thriving under pressure, while the other has yet to prove he can withstand it. McLaren finds itself in a situation as delicate as it is privileged. Having two drivers capable of fighting for the World Championship is a blessing for any team, but also a huge risk if not managed precisely. Team principal Andrea Stella has reiterated on more than one occasion that the official policy is to give Norris and Piastri exactly the same opportunities, ensuring that both cars receive technical updates simultaneously. For Lando Norris, this policy of equality represents a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it guarantees that he has the same material as Piastri to demonstrate his talent. But on the other, it forces him to face an uncomfortable mirror. If his teammate achieves better results with the same tools, there are no excuses. This added pressure is reflected in his most recent statements, where he has admitted that he constantly works on blocking out negative thoughts and not letting his self-criticism work against him. Even so, the external perception is that every mistake he makes has a double cost. Not only does it cause him to lose points, it also strengthens the narrative that McLaren should look more towards Piastri. Oscar Piastri, on the other hand, is benefiting from this situation with a maturity that surprises even the most veteran of Formula One. Whenever he is asked about equality within the team, he responds calmly and without signs of conflict. His speech is simple. He trusts that McLaren is doing the right thing and prefers to demonstrate on the track that he can be the natural leader of the project. This attitude, combined with consistent results and key victories on tricky circuits, reinforces the idea that his cool, analytical mindset puts him in an advantageous position over Norris. From the team's perspective, the big challenge is maintaining harmony within the garage. McLaren knows that if the rivalry between its drivers gets out of hand, it could end up directly affecting the Constructors' Championship and opening the door for rivals like Red Bull or Ferrari. That's why Stella and her team of engineers insist there won't be an official number one driver as long as both have a real chance of becoming champions. If there's one thing the history of Formula One has shown, it's that internal rivalries can be as destructive as they are spectacular. McLaren knows this terrain very well, having experienced it in the past with duels like the one between Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. Back then, the team had the most dominant car, but the tension between its two drivers ended up generating conflicts that marked an entire generation. The current situation, with Norris and Piastri, bears certain similarities. Both are young, talented, and have the same goal. If the team fails to manage this rivalry well, the risk of losing control is very high. For Lando Norris, the consequences of this duel could be decisive in his career. If he fails to manage the pressure and the mistakes continue to appear, his reputation as a fast but fragile driver could be definitively cemented. This, in addition to costing him a championship, could turn him into a second-place driver within his own team, something unthinkable just a couple of seasons ago. It would be a devastating blow for the man who has been the face of McLaren in recent years and who always dreamed of leading the team back to the top. Oscar Piastri, on the other hand, has a lot to gain from this confrontation. If he manages to beat Norris in the same car, he could not only become world champion, but also establish himself as McLaren's new natural leader. It would be a clear signal to the team's management and the entire paddock that the team's future revolves around him. In the long term, a favorable outcome in this duel could open doors for him that go beyond McLaren, positioning him as one of the most coveted names on the grid. For McLaren as an organization, the outcome of this rivalry could mark a turning point. If the management is correct, and they manage to get the two teams working together while competing for the title, the team could emerge stronger and demonstrate that it is capable of facing the most complex challenges. But if tensions escalate and become an obstacle, McLaren could lose vital points in the Constructors' Championship, something Red Bull or Ferrari would be keen to exploit. In that scenario, the dream of a historic title could crumble due to internal problems rather than a lack of on-track performance. The second half of the season is always the time when the pressure reaches its peak, and each race becomes a test of fire for drivers and teams. In McLaren's case, the big question is whether they can maintain the equal footing between Norris and Piastri without that tension translating into strategic errors or internal clashes that end up costing them the title. The margin for error is minimal, and any mistake can completely change the course of a championship. On the racing side, the expectations are clear. Both Norris and Piastri will have to raise their game to the maximum on circuits that will test tire management, adaptability, and mental resilience. Tracks like Singapore and Mexico are often unforgiving of mistakes, and it will be there that we will see who is truly prepared to withstand the pressure of fighting for a championship. Piastri's consistency puts him in a favorable position, but Norris has the speed and experience to reverse the narrative if he can stay focused. The dilemma is whether McLaren can afford to hold on to the final score, or whether it will have to intervene for the benefit of the overall result. At the same time, the impact this situation will have on the dynamics of the championship cannot be ignored. Red Bull and Ferrari will be attentive to any sign of weakness within McLaren, because they know that an internal fracture can open up opportunities for them in the fight for wins and key points. The big question is who will be able to endure the longest, not only in speed, but also in mental strength, because that will be the true key that will decide the championship. The conclusion to this story couldn't be more poignant. McLaren has a historic opportunity in its grasp to win a World Drivers' Championship again after years of drought. However, what should have been a path to glory is accompanied by internal tension that threatens to change everything. Norris and Piastri not only represent two different driving styles, but also two opposing ways of dealing with pressure. This duality is what makes McLaren the center of attention throughout Formula One, because any outcome within the team can completely change the balance of power in the category. What seemed like a simple rumor about mental weakness and technical favoritism has now become a reality that weighs heavily on every race. Norris remains the driver with enough speed to make the difference, but his mistakes under pressure haunt him. Piastri, on the other hand, conveys the confidence of a veteran despite his youth, which positions him as a relentless rival. This fight isn't just about the clock. It's a psychological battle where every detail counts, and where the margin for error is reduced to nothing. The outcome will be remembered not only for who lifts the trophy, but for how the team handled, or failed to handle, the most explosive rivalry of the season. That's the true scale of what's at stake, and what makes this moment one of the most exciting in modern Formula One.